My HOA president thought she was a queen, ruling her own little kingdom. But she forgot that every kingdom has a constitution. And I was about to use it to lead a revolution, right on her perfectly manicured lawn. It all started the day I decided to paint my mailbox. My name is Tom. I'm 48 years old. And after 20 years in the military, I just wanted to be left alone in what my wife Clara and I bought as our forever home. The first few weeks were pure bliss. I remember waking up to the sound of birds instead of a barracks bugle, sipping coffee on our small patio as the sun came up, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't realized I was missing for 2 decades. We unpacked the last of the boxes, hanging photos of our kids, turning the empty house into a home. I'd spent my life following a chain of command, respecting rules that had life or death consequences. So for me, the community of Willow Creek Estates and its homeowners association, the HOA, was a selling point. I appreciate order. I value structure. I never imagined that in a place of such supposed peace, the rules would be wielded as a weapon of psychological warfare, or that the person in charge was a tyrant in a tracksuit. Her name was Carol, the president of the HOA board. A woman in her 60s, with a perfectly styled helmet of blonde hair and cold, assessing eyes, that saw the world as a series of infractions waiting to be punished. Our first interaction was at the community welcome event. She moved through the crowd not like a neighbor, but like a general, reviewing her troops. She handed my wife and me a welcome basket containing cheap wine and a 300-page book of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the CC and RS, bound in a heavy, full leather binder. "Welcome to Willow Creek," she'd said, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "Everything you need to know to be a productive member of our community is in here." That night, I actually read it, cover to cover, highlighted sections. I wanted to be a good neighbor, to do things by the book. It was my nature. The trouble began with that sun-faded mailbox. On a bright Saturday morning, I was outside, sanding it down, feeling the simple satisfaction of manual work. I put on a fresh coat of glossy black, rust-proof paint. It looked sharp, clean, and exactly an improvement. By Monday afternoon, the first shot was fired. A crisp, cream-colored envelope was in my newly painted mailbox, the HOA logo embossed in gold like a royal seal. Inside was a violation notice, unauthorized modification of exterior property. It stated the color of the paint, obsidian black, was not in compliance with the pre-approved sable black specified in the architectural guidelines. A grainy zoomed-in photo was attached, an aggressive red arrow pointing to my mailbox. And at the bottom of the page, a fine. $100. It was so absurd I laughed. It had to be a mistake. I called the number, and Carol herself answered, her voice a syrupy blend of condescension and delight. "Ah, yes, Mr. Henderson," she purred. "The mailbox. I saw you working on it this weekend. Such diligence, a shame it wasn't channeled correctly. Rules are rules, you understand." I tried to reason with her, to explain that it was black paint on a black mailbox, that no human eye could distinguish obsidian from sable from 10 feet away. Her tone hardened, the sweetness evaporating to reveal the steel beneath. "Are you a member of the Architectural Review Committee, Mr. Henderson?" "No. I am, and I say it's not compliant. The fine stands. Please remit payment within 7 business days to avoid the standard $25 a day late fee." The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, the phone buzzing with a dial tone, and I felt a cold shiver wash over me. This wasn't about order. This was about obedience. I paid the $100, telling Clara it was easier to comply than to fight. But the payment wasn't a peace treaty. It was an admission of weakness. And like a shark tasting blood, Carol began to circle. The violations started coming weekly. A $200 fine, because my garbage cans were visible from the street for 45 minutes after the truck had passed. The rulebook stated they must be stowed within 30 minutes. I'd been on a work call and lost track of time. A $50 fine, because the small American flag I'd hung from my porch for the 4th of July was 2 inches wider than the regulations allowed. It was a war of 1,000 paper cuts, each one properly documented, designed to bleed me slowly, to keep me perpetually off balance, to remind me who was in charge. Her harassment became more personal, more invasive. One afternoon, I saw her on the sidewalk across the street, just standing there. She raised her phone and began taking pictures of my house, my yard, my windows, her face a cold, dispassionate mask. I felt a chill run down my spine. I was being watched, hunted, in the one place I was supposed to feel safe. I started talking to my neighbors, my military training kicking in, reconnaissance, intelligence gathering. I found a community living under a quiet, suffocating martial law. I met George, a retired firefighter, while he was washing his car. After a few minutes of small talk, I cautiously brought up the HOA. His face darkened. "Let me give you some advice," he said, his voice a low growl. "Don't poke the bear. That woman, Carol, she doesn't just fine you. She tries to break you. Last year, she tried to have my dog, Buster, designated as a nuisance animal, to have him removed from the neighborhood. All because he barked at a squirrel during her afternoon nap. He told me about the endless hearings, the legal threats, the sheer stress of it all. He'd won, but it had cost him thousands in legal fees. Everyone had a story. Everyone lived in fear of that cream-colored envelope. They'd all learned the hard way. You don't fight Carol, you just try to survive her." The final straw, the act that pushed me past the point of no return, came on a rainy Tuesday. A certified letter requiring a signature. My hands were trembling slightly as I signed for it. Inside was a multi-page document. It was a cumulative fine, totaling $5,000 for failure to maintain lawn consistency and color uniformity. She had attached dozens of photos, taken over several weeks, with circles and notes. Evidence of clover. Blade height in this quadrant is 3.25 inches, a violation of the 3-inch mandate. But the fine wasn't the declaration of war. It was the sentence at the bottom of the final page. Due to these repeated and uncorrected violations, the HOA board has voted to place a lien on your property. A lien, the first legal step toward foreclosure, over a 1/4 inch of grass and a patch of clover. She was trying to take my house, my family's security, my dream. That night was the longest of my life. I felt a kind of fear I hadn't felt since my first tour overseas, a cold, suffocating panic that this was a battle I was completely unequipped to fight. Clara was beside herself, her quiet tears more painful than any shouting could ever be. She saw our life savings, our future, being stolen by this one cruel, obsessive woman. I sat in my office all night, the foreclosure letter on my desk like a death sentence. The 300-page rulebook beside it, like a holy text for a religion I couldn't comprehend. I felt beaten. And then, sometime around 3 a.m., staring at the page, detailing the fine for sable black versus obsidian black, something inside me snapped. The fear didn't vanish, it crystallized. It turned from a cold, heavy stone in my gut into a shard of pure, sharp ice. The soldier I thought I had left behind woke up. This was not a dispute. This was war. And the first rule of warfare is that you do not fight on the enemy's chosen ground. Her ground was this book, this modern set of rules she knew better than anyone. I needed to find a different battlefield. My house was built in 1978. This rulebook was the 2018 revision. 40 years of history, of amendments, of changes. Where were the original documents? The next morning, I drove to the county records office. A dusty, forgotten building that smelled of old paper and decaying history. I spent the entire day hunched over a microfiche reader, my eyes burning, scrolling through decades of mundane county filings. By 4 p.m., I had found nothing. The clerk, an easy-to-approach woman, getting ready to close up, told me I'd seen everything they had for Willow Creek. My heart sank. It was a dead end. I felt the despair creeping back in, cold and heavy. As I was packing my briefcase, defeated, I noticed it. A single gray, unlabeled banker's box on a bottom shelf, covered in a thick layer of dust. "What's in that box?" I asked. The clerk sighed. "Probably nothing. It's from the old courthouse annex, pre-digital, uncatalogued. Could be anything." On a final, desperate hunch, I asked if I could look. She shrugged. "Knock yourself out." I opened the box, and inside, beneath piles of old tax documents, was a brittle yellowed binder. The cover read, "Willow Creek Estates, Articles of Incorporation and Original CC and RS, 1978. My breath caught in my throat. I started reading, my fingers tracing the old typewritten words. And then I saw it, tucked away in the back, in a section titled Governance and Dissolution. A single beautiful paragraph. Article 11, Section 4. It laid out a process, a nuclear option, by which the entire HOA board could be dissolved permanently with a 2/3 majority vote. The vote could be triggered by a petition signed by just 25% of homeowners, citing the board's failure to uphold the original community charter. My heart was hammering. I frantically searched the revision history I had found earlier. The entire dissolution section, Article 11, had been removed in a 1994 amendment. But I knew, from a past property dispute, that state law was tricky unless the original charter explicitly allowed for a specific, fundamental right to be amended away. That right could be argued as perpetual. It was a long shot, a thread, but it was the only thread I had. I spent $20 copying every single page, got the documents notarized by a clerk down the street, and began my secret war. I couldn't be seen. Carol had eyes everywhere. I started with George, the firefighter. We met in his garage after dark. I laid the yellowed pages out on his workbench. As he read, I saw the years of frustration in his eyes slowly turn into a flicker of hope. He signed the petition without a moment's hesitation. He gave me 2 names and a warning. "Be careful, Tom. If she gets wind of this before you're ready, she'll burn us all to the ground." It became a clandestine operation, a chain of trust. I met people in their backyards, in dimly lit garages, communicating through coded text messages. We were building a resistance, one terrified, hopeful signature at a time. We had one near miss. I was in a neighbor's kitchen, the petition on the table, when his dog started barking frantically. We looked out the window and saw her, Carol, standing under a streetlight, staring at the house. We froze, dropping to the floor, my heart pounding in my ears until we heard the sound of her car door closing and driving away. It took 3 agonizing weeks, but we did it. 32 signatures, just over the 25% I needed. I followed the 1978 charter to the letter. I submitted the petition not to the board, but to the HOA's registered legal counsel, a law firm downtown. I requested a special meeting for the vote. The effect was a legal bombshell. All actions against me were immediately suspended. Carol was legally barred from having any contact with me or any of the other petitioners. The Queen was in check. The 2 weeks leading up to the meeting were a blur of psychological warfare. Carol couldn't attack me, so she attacked the idea of me. She sent out newsletters filled with fear-mongering and lies, painting the petitioners as rogue agents of chaos who wanted to destroy property values. The night of the meeting, the community clubhouse was a pressure cooker. Carol and her board sat at the front, a united front of smug certainty, but I could see the panic in her eyes. She gave a speech, full of threats veiled as promises of order and standards. She painted me as a disgruntled man who couldn't follow simple rules. It was a masterful performance of manipulation. Then, it was my turn. I walked to the podium and looked out at my neighbors. I threw away my notes. "I'm not going to talk about the rules," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "I'm going to talk about how it feels. How it feels to be afraid in your own home, to worry that the length of your grass could cost you everything you've ever worked for." I made eye contact with people in the crowd. George, it's about how it feels to have someone threaten to take your dog. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, it's about being fined for an oil stain that was there when you moved in. This is not about order, it's about cruelty. This is our community, not our kingdom. Tonight, we take it back. The vote was by paper ballot. The silence was deafening as they were counted. The lawyer was handed the final tally. He cleared his throat. On the motion to dissolve the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association, he paused. The vote is 84 in favor and 36 against. A wave of sound crashed through the room. Cheers, tears, a collective cathartic roar of liberation. I looked at Carol. The color had drained from her face. Her perfectly constructed world had been utterly demolished. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and without a word, she walked out of the clubhouse and out of our lives. We had done it. The war was won, and our forever home was finally, truly, ours.